I woke up at 7:30 in the morning, as usual. In 72 years of life, my body had grown accustomed to the routine, and even in retirement, I couldn't bring myself to sleep any longer. The sun had not yet risen completely, and it was a gray October twilight outside the windows. I got out of bed, stretched my stiff back, and headed for the kitchen. I brewed coffee in the old coffee pot my late wife Dorothy had given me back in '78. I spread peanut butter on my toast and sat down at the kitchen table by the window. Outside the glass, I could see my small yard with its neatly cut grass and the old garage I'd built myself 20 years ago. The leaves on the only oak tree in the yard had turned yellow and started to fall, covering the ground with a golden carpet. After breakfast, I looked at the morning paper, as usual. I read the news about the mayoral election, complained about the increase in gasoline prices, and scolded the young people who don't know how to park properly. At 7 o'clock in the morning, the radio broadcast the weather forecast. They promised rain by noon. I thought it would be a good idea to check on my Mustang and maybe even take a ride to the mall. It had been 3 weeks since I'd driven it. The fall weather in Millville was rainy and overcast, and a 1,967-year-old car required care. For 30 years, I've been scavenging for original parts for this car. I bought them at junkyards, ordered them through friends, sometimes even traveled to other states for rare parts. I rebuilt the engine twice, repainted the body 3 times, until I got the perfect shade. Dark green metallic, exactly the same as the Ford plant in '67. I remembered every bolt, every detail on that car. The chrome bumpers gleamed like a mirror, the leather seats smelled of special air conditioning, and under the hood was an 8-cylinder engine with a displacement of 4.7 tenths of a liter that purred like a contented cat. This car was more than just a car. It was the embodiment of all my efforts, a dream I had cherished since my youth, when I was still working as a postal inspector and saving every extra dollar for a future project. Dorothy often laughed at my obsession, but she understood. This Mustang meant more to me than just a means of transportation. I washed the dishes, threw on an old brown jacket, and headed for the garage. The fall air was fresh and humid, smelling of fallen leaves and approaching rain. It was quiet outside. The neighbors were still asleep or had already left for work. Only Mrs. Parker from across the street was watering the flowers on the porch and waved at me. I nodded back and walked to the metal garage door. I put the key in the lock and turned it. The mechanism clicked with a familiar sound, and I pulled the gate open. Usually I did it automatically, without even looking inside. But today something made me stop at the threshold. The garage was empty. I froze, unable to believe my own eyes. Where my beautiful Mustang had always stood, there was an empty space. The gray concrete floor, a dark oil stain where the gearbox usually leaked a little, shelves with neatly arranged tools and parts along the walls, a workbench in the corner with a vise and a sharpener. Everything was in its place. Only the car was gone. My heart pounded so hard and fast that I felt a sharp pain in my chest. My left arm went numb, and for a second I thought I was having a heart attack. I grabbed the metal frame of the gate and inhaled deeply of the cold morning air. Once inside, I turned on the daylight bulb under the ceiling. Bright light flooded the garage, and I looked around again, hoping I was just mistaken or imagining things. Maybe I'd gone somewhere on my own yesterday and forgotten. But no, I'd spent all day yesterday at home, watching an old Clint Eastwood movie on TV, reading the evening paper, eating a warmed-up soup dinner. The car was definitely parked here yesterday, the last time I went into the garage to check the antifreeze level before the coming cold weather. I walked around the garage, checking every corner. On the shelves were my tools: wrenches, screwdrivers, jack, oil can. In the corner were the tires I was changing to winter tires. All the stuff was in its place. Nothing was missing, except for the most important thing. I checked the side door that led to the small utility room. It was locked and keyed as usual. The lock on the main gate didn't look broken or damaged either. But someone had definitely been here and had somehow taken my car away. And they'd done it so quietly that I couldn't hear anything from inside the house. Theft. Someone stole my Mustang. 30 years of work, all my savings, all my dreams, all gone overnight. My hands shook as I pulled my cell phone out of my jacket pocket. Hester had given it to me 2 years ago. telling me that at my age it was imperative to always be in touch. It took me a long time to get used to the small buttons and complicated functions, but I gradually got used to the basic operations. The first order of business was to call the police, but before that I decided to contact Hester. My only daughter worked as a coordinator for the county's Department of Social Services and usually arrived at the office early to sort through the morning mail. She had a spare key to the garage. I had given it to her a couple years ago after a minor heart attack, in case something happened to my health again and she needed to pick up some things. I found her number in the phone book and pressed the call button. There were long, monotonous beeps. Then it went to voicemail. "You've reached Hester Fernsby Relish. Leave a message after the tone." "Hester, it's Dad," I said, trying to speak calmly, though my voice was shaking. "Call me urgently as soon as you hear this message. I have a serious problem. It's very urgent." I disconnected and tried dialing again. The answering machine again. That's weird. Usually Hester always answered my calls, especially in the morning when she knew I might be worried about something important. I went back into the house, turned on the coffee maker, and dialed the police number. The officer on duty listened to my story patiently and professionally, asked a few clarifying questions about the make of the car, license plates, and the time I last saw the vehicle. Said he would send a patrol unit within the hour to take a report. After talking to the police, I tried calling Hester again, then called her husband Kenrick at work. The receptionist at the telecommunications company said he hadn't arrived yet, even though the workday had already begun. The next 45 minutes seemed like an eternity. I walked around the house from room to room, trying to read the newspaper, but the letters were blurred before my eyes. I made coffee and forgot to drink it. I looked out the window at the empty garage and couldn't believe what was happening. Who would steal my car? The crime rate was relatively low in Millville, and my neighborhood was considered quiet and safe. Most of the neighbors knew each other by sight and kept order. Besides, the Mustang was too conspicuous and recognizable. A dark green classic car from the 67th year couldn't get lost in the stream of modern cars. I called everyone I knew, Jerry the mechanic, who sometimes helped me with particularly complicated repairs. My neighbor Robert McDonald, who lived across the street and was usually out early with his dog. My old buddy Fred Hughes from the Postal Service, with whom we worked together for 15 years. No one saw or heard anything suspicious during the night. When the policeman finally arrived, I was beginning to doubt my own memory. Maybe I'm confusing things. Maybe I'd left the car somewhere else and just forgotten. Officer Davis turned out to be a pleasant young man in his 30s with a neat haircut and attentive brown eyes. He was polite, professional, and most importantly, took my problem seriously. Some police officers, especially younger ones, are sometimes condescending toward older people, but Davis listened carefully to every word I said. We inspected the garage together. He took pictures of the empty space where the car was parked, checked the locks, wrote down the car's serial number, which I knew by heart, and the engine number. Asked detailed questions about when I had last seen the car, what were its distinguishing features, whether anyone else had access to the garage. "Does anyone have spare keys to the garage or the car?" he asked, jotting down my answers in a service notebook. "My daughter has a key to the garage," I answered after a slight hesitation. "But she would never, if she needed a car, she'd just ask me." "How often does she use that key?" "Almost never. I only gave it to her in case of a health emergency." "And the keys to the car itself?" "Just me. I never gave them to anyone else." Davis nodded and continued writing down the information. Then he asked about possible enemies, debts, conflicts with neighbors. I answered honestly that I had no quarrels with anyone and owed no money to anyone. "Mr. Fernsby," he said, closing his notebook, "will send out a statewide APB immediately. We'll also check surveillance footage from nearby streets and contact scrap yards. Sometimes stolen classic cars are taken apart for parts. I also recommend you contact your insurance company. If the car is indeed stolen, you will need an official police report to file an insurance claim." After the policeman left, I was left alone with my thoughts and my growing anxiety. I dialed Hester's number again. This time she answered after the third long beep. "Hi, Dad." Her voice sounded strained and unnatural, not at all like it usually did in the morning. "I'm sorry I didn't answer earlier. I've been really busy." "Hester, my car was stolen," I said without further ado. Long silence. Too long. What? She finally said, and I heard something strange in her voice. The Mustang disappeared from the garage, I repeated. I'd already called the police, filed a report. You didn't happen to take the car, did you? You have the keys to the garage. Another pause. I could hear her breathing into the phone. No, Dad, I didn't take your car, she finally answered, but her voice sounded unconvincing. Something in her tone immediately alerted me. Hester had always been a poor actress. Even as a child, I could easily guess when she was trying to hide the truth. Too long pauses, avoidance of direct gaze, change in tone of voice. All these signs I knew well. Are you absolutely sure? I asked insistently. Maybe Kenrick asked you to take the keys. Maybe he's having trouble with his car. Dad, I told you, I didn't take your car, she said sharply, a note of irritation in her voice. I have to go now. I have an important meeting. I'll call you back later, okay? She hung up before I could say anything. I was left standing in the middle of the living room with the phone in my hand, trying to make sense of the strangeness of this conversation. It was the first time in years that my daughter had spoken to me in such a harsh, almost rude tone. It was the first time she had lied to me so obviously and clumsily. And for the first time in years, I felt that some invisible wall had formed between us. And for the first time, I began to seriously suspect what had really happened to my beloved Mustang. After talking to Hester, I couldn't find a place to go. I walked around the house, tried to do the usual things, but my thoughts kept coming back to the empty garage and my daughter's strange behavior. Something was definitely wrong. In 45 years, I had studied Hester's character well enough to know when she was telling the truth and when she was trying to hide something. At 10:30, I called the police station again and asked to be put through to Officer Davis. The officer on duty said he was busy at the moment, but would pass on the message. I left my phone number and asked him to call me back as soon as possible. I decided to take another hard look at the garage. Maybe I had missed something, some detail that would help me understand what had happened. I put on my jacket and went out into the yard. The morning was gray and cool. Mrs. Parker, the neighbor, was still in her garden, trimming the withered stems of her chrysanthemums. When she saw me, she waved her garden shears at me. "Good morning, Barnett," she shouted over the low fence. "How are you?" "Good morning, Ellen," I replied, coming closer. Mrs. Parker had lived across the street for 20 years, and we were on good neighborly terms. "Tell me, did you happen to hear anything suspicious last night? The sound of a car? Voices?" She raised her eyebrows in surprise. "Did something happen?" "My car was stolen from my garage." "Oh my God!" Ellen dropped the scissors and walked to the fence. "Your beautiful green Mustang? But how is that possible? I don't understand it either. You haven't heard anything?" She shook her head thoughtfully. "No, nothing in particular. Although," Ellen frowned, remembering. "About 7:30 in the morning, I heard a car start, but I thought it was one of the neighbors leaving early for work." "Could it have been? At 7:30? I asked again. "Are you sure?" "Yes, I got up early to water the flowers before the sun got too bright. I heard the sound of an engine, but I didn't pay any attention. So the car was driven away early in the morning, about the time I was just waking up. That explained why I hadn't heard anything. I was still in bed at 7:30. "Thank you, Ellen. This is important information. I hope the police find your car. It was so beautiful. You worked on it for so many years." I nodded and headed for the garage. I turned on the light and again scrutinized every inch of the space. On the concrete floor, in addition to the old oil stain, there were tire tracks, clear tread prints that led from where the car was usually parked to the gate. I squatted down and scrutinized the tracks. The tread looked familiar. They were my winter tires that I had put on the Mustang a month ago. So the car had actually been driven out of the garage on the road, not towed away. But how did the thief start the engine without the keys? The '67 Mustang wasn't equipped with a modern alarm system, but it couldn't be stolen just like that. I walked the perimeter of the garage, checking the windows and walls. The small window on the side was closed from the inside, as usual. No sign of forced entry. Someone had entered through the main entrance using a key. That's when the phone rang. Officer Davis was returning the call as promised. "Mr. Fernsby, I got your message. Is there any new information?" "Yes," I answered. A neighbor heard a car start at 7:30 this morning, and I found tire tracks in the garage. The car was definitely driven off. I see. That means the perpetrator had the keys to the car. Are you absolutely sure you didn't give them to anyone? Absolutely. The keys are always in my bedroom nightstand. Okay. I'm just finishing up another call right now, and I'll be there in half an hour. We need to get a more detailed report and fingerprint the garage. After talking to the police, I went back into the house and checked the nightstand in the bedroom. I opened the top drawer where I usually kept the keys to the Mustang on a keychain in the shape of a miniature horse. The drawer was empty. My heart beat faster again. The keys were gone. Someone had been to my house and taken them. But when? And who would know where they were? I took a careful look around the bedroom. The bed was made just as I'd left it that morning. There was no sign that anyone had gone through the things. On the dresser were pictures of Dorothy and Hester, the cufflink box my coworkers had given me at retirement. Everything in its place. I checked the rest of the rooms. The living room, the kitchen, the small office. Everywhere was in order. The front door was locked with both locks as usual. The windows were closed too. No sign of forced entry. But the keys were missing, which means someone was in the house. Someone with keys to the house. I sat down in the living room chair and tried to think calmly about the situation. Only Hester had the keys to my house. I had given them to her after Dorothy died when I started living alone, and she started worrying about my health. No one else had spare keys. Had my own daughter stolen my car? But why? Hester and Kenrick had their own cars. They weren't new, but they were reliable. Besides, if she needed a Mustang for something, she could have just asked. I never said no to anything. The doorbell rang. Officer Davis arrived exactly at the appointed time. This time he wasn't alone. A forensic technician came with him, carrying a fingerprint case. "Mr. Fernsby," Davis said as I let them in, "tell me more about the information from the neighbor." I recounted the conversation with Mrs. Parker and showed the tire tracks in the garage. The technician photographed the tread prints and began treating the surfaces with a special powder, revealing fingerprints on knobs, locks, tools. "One more detail," I told Davis. "My car keys are missing. They were always in the bedroom, in the nightstand. They're not there now." Davis looked at me carefully. "So someone broke into the house. Any sign of forced entry?" "No. All the locks are intact. Windows are locked." Inquiry: "Who else has keys to your house?" I hesitated to answer. It was hard to say my suspicions out loud. "Only my daughter." "The one with the key to the garage?" "Yes." Davis wrote it down in his notebook, but made no comment. Professionalism prevented him from speculating out loud. "Mr. Fernsby, I understand this is a delicate situation, but we need to check all the possibilities. Can you contact your daughter and ask her if she knows anything about the missing keys?" "Sure," I agreed, though my heart squeezed at the thought of that conversation. The technician finished his work in the garage and moved on to the house. He fingerprinted the bedroom nightstand, the doorknobs, the locks. He worked carefully and silently, occasionally marking something in his notebook. "How long will it take to analyze and rationale?" I asked Davis. "A few days, maybe a week. We'll compare the prints we find with the database and with yours for exclusion. If we find someone else's prints, it'll be a big clue." After the cops left, I was left alone with heavy thoughts. I needed to talk to Hester again, but I didn't know how to start the conversation. How to ask my own daughter if she stole my car. I dialed her work number. The secretary at the Department of Social Services answered on the second dial tone. "Department of Human Services, speaking. Hi, this is Barnett Fernsby. May I speak to Hester Fernsby Relish, please? One moment, I'll put you through." After a brief musical pause, Hester answered the phone. "Yes, Daddy?" "Hester, I need to have a serious talk with you. Can you come over to my house tonight after work?" "What do you want to talk about?" I could hear the wariness in her voice again. "About the car. New circumstances have come up." A long pause. "Okay," she finally said. "I'll come by around 7 o'clock. Hester, wait. Just one more question. Have you by any chance seen the keys to the Mustang? They're missing from my nightstand." Another pause, longer than the last. "No, Dad, I haven't seen your keys." But I could hear the same fake note in her voice again that I'd heard this morning. And I realized that tonight's conversation was going to be one of the hardest of my life. After talking to Hester, I couldn't find a place to be. I walked around the house, tried to do my usual chores, but my thoughts kept returning to the empty garage and my daughter's strange behavior. Something was definitely wrong. In 45 years, I had studied Hester's character well enough to know when she was telling the truth and when she was trying to hide something. At 10:30, I called the police station again and asked to be put through to Officer Davis. The officer on duty said he was busy at the moment but would pass on the message. I left my phone number and asked him to call me back as soon as possible. I decided to take another hard look at the garage. Maybe I had missed something, some detail that would help me understand what had happened. I put on my jacket and went out into the yard. The morning was gray and cool. Mrs. Parker, the neighbor, was still in her garden, trimming the withered stems of her chrysanthemums. When she saw me, she waved her garden shears at me. "Good morning, Barnett," she shouted over the low fence. "How are you?" "Good morning, Ellen," I replied, coming closer. Mrs. Parker had lived across the street for 20 years, and we were on good neighborly terms. "Tell me, did you happen to hear anything suspicious last night? The sound of a car, voices?" She raised her eyebrows in surprise. "Did something happen?" "My car was stolen from my garage." "Oh my God!" Ellen dropped the scissors and walked to the fence. "Your beautiful green Mustang? But how is that possible? I don't understand it either. You haven't heard anything?" She shook her head thoughtfully. "No, nothing in particular. Although," Ellen frowned, remembering, "about 7:30 in the morning, I heard a car start. But I thought it was one of the neighbors leaving early for work. Could it have been?" "At 7:30?" I asked again. "Are you sure?" "Yes, I got up early to water the flowers before the sun got too bright. I heard the sound of an engine, but I didn't pay any attention. So the car was driven away early in the morning, about the time I was just waking up. That explained why I hadn't heard anything. I was still in bed at 7:30. Thank you, Ellen. This is important information. I hope the police find your car. It was so beautiful. You worked on it for so many years." I nodded and headed for the garage. I turned on the light and again scrutinized every inch of the space. On the concrete floor, in addition to the old oil stain, there were tire tracks, clear tread prints that led from where the car was usually parked to the gate. I squatted down and scrutinized the tracks. The tread looked familiar. They were my winter tires that I had put on the Mustang a month ago. So the car had actually been driven out of the garage on the road, not towed away. But how did the thief start the engine without the keys? The '67 Mustang wasn't equipped with a modern alarm system, but it couldn't be stolen just like that. I walked the perimeter of the garage, checking the windows and walls. The small window on the side was closed from the inside, as usual. No sign of forced entry. Someone had entered through the main entrance using a key. That's when the phone rang. Officer Davis was returning the call, as promised. "Mr. Fernsby, I got your message. Is there any new information?" "Yes," I answered. "A neighbor heard a car start at 7:30 this morning, and I found tire tracks in the garage. The car was definitely driven off." "I see. That means the perpetrator had the keys to the car." "Are you absolutely sure you didn't give them to anyone?" "Absolutely. The keys are always in my bedroom nightstand." Okay. I'm just finishing up another call right now and I'll be there in half an hour. We need to get a more detailed report and fingerprint the garage. After talking to the police, I went back into the house and checked the nightstand in the bedroom. I opened the top drawer where I usually kept the keys to the Mustang on a keychain in the shape of a miniature horse. The drawer was empty. My heart beat faster again. The keys were gone. Someone had been to my house and taken them. But when? And who would know where they were? I took a careful look around the bedroom. The bed was made just as I left it that morning. There was no sign that anyone had gone through the things. On the dresser were pictures of Dorothy and Hester, the cufflink box my coworkers had given me at retirement. Everything in its place. I checked the rest of the rooms. The living room, the kitchen, the small office. Everywhere was in order. The front door was locked with both locks, as usual. The windows were closed, too. No sign of forced entry. But the keys were missing, which means someone was in the house. Someone with keys to the house. I sat down in the living room chair and tried to think calmly about the situation. Only Hester had the keys to my house. I had given them to her after Dorothy died when I started living alone, and she started worrying about my health. No one else had spare keys. Had my own daughter stolen my car? But why? Hester and Kenrick had their own cars. They weren't new, but they were reliable. Besides, if she needed a Mustang for something, she could have just asked. I never said no to anything. The doorbell rang. Officer Davis arrived exactly at the appointed time. This time he wasn't alone. A forensic technician came with him, carrying a fingerprint case. "Mr. Fernsby," Davis said as I let them in, "tell me more about the information from the neighbor." I recounted the conversation with Mrs. Parker and showed the tire tracks in the garage. The technician photographed the tread prints and began treating the surfaces with a special powder, revealing fingerprints on knobs, locks, tools. "One more detail," I told Davis. "My car keys are missing. They were always in the bedroom, in the nightstand. They're not there now." Davis looked at me carefully. "So someone broke into the house? Any sign of forced entry?" "No. All the locks are intact. Windows are locked." "Who else has keys to your house?" I hesitated to answer. It was hard to say my suspicions out loud. "Only my daughter." "The one with the key to the garage?" "Yes." Davis wrote it down in his notebook, but made no comment. Professionalism prevented him from speculating out loud. "Mr. Fernsby, I understand this is a delicate situation, but we need to check all the possibilities. Can you contact your daughter and ask her if she knows anything about the missing keys?" "Sure," I agreed, though my heart squeezed at the thought of that conversation. The technician finished his work in the garage and moved on to the house. He fingerprinted the bedroom nightstand, the doorknobs, the locks. He worked carefully and silently, occasionally marking something in his notebook. "How long will it take to analyze him?" I asked Davis. "A few days, maybe a week. We'll compare the prints we find with the database and with yours for exclusion. If we find someone else's prints, it'll be a big clue." After the cops left, I was left alone with heavy thoughts. I needed to talk to Hester again, but I didn't know how to start the conversation, how to ask my own daughter if she stole my car. I dialed her work number. The secretary at the Department of Social Services answered on the second dial tone. "Department of Human Services, speaking." "Hi, this is Barnett Fernsby. May I speak to Hester Fernsby Relish, please?" "One moment, I'll put you through." After a brief musical pause, Hester answered the phone. "Yes, Daddy?" "Hester, I need to have a serious talk with you. Can you come over to my house tonight after work?" "What do you want to talk about?" I could hear the wariness in her voice again. "About the car. New circumstances have come up." A long pause. "Okay," she finally said. "I'll come by around 7 o'clock. Hester, wait. Just one more question. Have you by any chance seen the keys to the Mustang? They're missing from my nightstand." Another pause, longer than the last. "No, Dad, I haven't seen your keys." But I could hear the same fake note in her voice again that I'd heard this morning. And I realized that tonight's conversation was going to be one of the hardest of my life. For the rest of the day, I couldn't find a place to sit. I tried to read the newspaper, but the letters were blurring before my eyes. I turned on the television, but I couldn't concentrate on the programs. My thoughts kept returning to the missing car and Hester's strange behavior. The more I thought about it, the more details came to mind, like the way she avoided answering my questions directly, or the way she didn't call me back even though she promised to do so. Hester had always been a responsible girl, even as a child. If she promised to do something, she always did it. But today it was like she'd been switched. By 6:01 p.m., I had completely lost my patience. Waiting until 7 hours was beyond me. I decided to drive myself to Hester's house. I had an old Honda Accord, which I used for everyday driving, leaving the Mustang for special occasions and weekend outings. Hester and Kenrick's house was 15 minutes away from mine, in a new neighborhood in Millville, where cottages for young families had been actively built in recent years. Their two-story red brick house had been purchased 3 years ago, and I had helped them with the down payment. They paid most of the mortgage themselves, but sometimes, when financial difficulties arose, I helped with the monthly payments as well. As I approached their street, I got more and more nervous. What would I say if the car wasn't there? What if it would be there? Both options scared me in their own way. Turning onto Maple Street, where Hester lived, I immediately saw a familiar silhouette. In the driveway of the house number 234 stood my Mustang. The dark green metallic gleamed in the streetlight, the chrome bumpers reflecting the last rays of the setting sun. I pulled the Honda over to the curb and, for a few minutes, I just sat there, staring at my car. A mixture of relief, anger, and bewilderment filled my chest. On the one hand, the Mustang was unharmed. On the other, the fact that it was here meant only one thing. Hester had lied to me. My own daughter had stolen my car. I got out of the Honda and walked slowly toward the house. There were lights on in the windows, which meant someone was home. Climbing up on the porch, I pressed the doorbell. Kenrick opened the door. My brother-in-law was a tall, thin man with thinning brown hair and a perpetually tired expression. Working as a technician for a telecommunications company took a lot out of him, and he usually looked exhausted in the evenings. Sisson, "Oh, hello, Barnett," he said with a strained smile. "Didn't expect you so early. Hester said you'd be here at 7. "Change of plans," I replied briefly, trying to control my tone of voice. "I need to talk to her right now." Kenrick stepped aside, letting me into the house. "She's in the kitchen making dinner. Do you want some coffee?" "No, thanks." I made my way into the living room, where the sounds of cooking and the radio played softly. The house was furnished with modern, light wood furniture, and Hester's family photos and diplomas hung on the walls. Everything looked cozy and prosperous, an ordinary middle-class American family. "Hester," Kenrick called out, "Daddy's here to see you." The sounds from the kitchen died down. Then footsteps were heard. Hester appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands with a kitchen towel. She was wearing a work blouse and dark pants, her hair in a neat bun. She looked tense, and there was anxiety in her eyes. "Hi, Daddy," she said, not coming any closer. "I thought you said you were coming at 7. "Hester," I began, trying to speak calmly, "my car is in your driveway." She turned pale but tried to keep a cool expression on her face. "What car?" "Don't pretend. My Mustang is parked in front of your house, the same one you said you didn't take." Kenrick shifted uncomfortably from foot to foot, somewhere behind me. It was obvious he didn't know how to act in this situation. "Dad, let's sit down and talk quietly," Hester suggested, pointing to the couch. "I prefer to stand. Explain to me what my car is doing at your place." Hester exchanged a quick glance with her husband, then took a deep breath. "Okay, yes, I took your car, but it's not theft, Dad. It's a gift." "A gift?" I asked, not believing my own ears. "Yes, I gave the car to Kenrick for his birthday. He turned 47 yesterday." I looked at Kenrick, who was standing with his eyes down, obviously feeling very awkward. "You gave my car to your husband without my permission?" "Dad, it's family property," Hester said in the tone one uses to explain obvious things to a child. "We're family. Besides, you're old. You don't need a car that powerful. Kenrick would benefit more from it." I felt the blood rush to my face. 72 years of life, and my own daughter tells me I'm too old for my own car. "Family property?" I repeated slowly. "Hester, it's my car. I bought it, I restored it for 30 years, I paid for it. What does Kenrick have to do with it?" "Well, technically, of course, it's registered to you," Hester agreed, "but it's actually a family heirloom. Sooner or later, it would have been inherited anyway." Inherited? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Hester, I'm alive and well. Nobody died." "Sexum." "Of course, Dad, that's not what I meant," she said quickly, realizing she had said something inappropriate. "It's just, well, you know, the years have taken their toll, and that car's just sitting in the garage doing nothing. Kenrick will drive it to work. It'll get some use." Kenrick finally decided to intervene in the conversation. "Barnett, I really appreciate the gift, but if you don't mind—" "Shut up, Kenrick," Hester sharply interrupted him. "This is a family matter." "Exactly," I said. "A family matter. Between me and my daughter, who stole my car." "I didn't steal it," Hester was outraged. "I just took something that already belongs to the family. And besides, how much money have you spent on us over the years? Helping with the house, Kenrick's car, giving us money all the time. Can't one car be our gratitude for all your help?" "My help was voluntary," I answered. "No one forced me. I helped you because you are my daughter, because I love you. But that doesn't give you the right to dispose of my property without asking." "Without asking?" Hester laughed, but it was an unnatural laugh. Daddy, you'd never agree to just give up the car. You'd find 1,000 reasons why you couldn't. How do you know? You didn't even try to ask. Because I know you. That car is like a shrine to you. You would never give it up willingly. I looked at my daughter and I didn't recognize her. Where was the girl I raised? Where was the woman who called me every few days to see how I was doing? Standing before me was a stranger who thought she was entitled to my property just because we were related. Hester, I said as calmly as I could, I want my car keys and my house keys back. Right now. What? She obviously didn't see that coming. You heard her. The keys to the Mustang and the keys to my house. Now. Dad, you can't be serious, can you? Because of some misunderstanding, you want to fight with your only daughter? A misunderstanding. I could feel my voice getting louder, even though I was trying to keep it down. Awkward. You stole my car. You broke into my house and took my keys. You lied to me when I asked. What kind of misunderstanding is that? Okay, Kenrick said quickly, clearly trying to quell the conflict. There's no need to fight. Hester, give Daddy his car back. I didn't really need it, to be honest. Shut up, Kenrick. Hester cut him off abruptly. Then she turned to me. Dad, you're being selfish. Think about your family. Think about how much we mean to each other. That's exactly what I'm thinking about, I replied. And I realize that to you, I mean only as a source of money and gifts. Keys, Hester. For a few seconds, we looked at each other in silence. In her eyes, I saw anger, resentment, and something else. Perhaps the realization that she had gone too far. Okay, she finally said. Take your precious car. She left the living room and returned a few minutes later with 2 sets of keys, one for the car and one for the house. Threw them into my hands without a word. Thank you, I said, tucking the keys into my jacket pocket. Now I'm going home, in my own car. Heading for the exit, I stopped at the door and turned around. One more thing, Hester. Next time you need something from me, ask directly, like a grown man to a grown man. I walked out of the house without waiting for an answer. I got into my Mustang, started the engine, which purred a familiar tune, and drove home. In the rearview mirror, I saw Hester and Kenrick standing on the porch watching me. The drive home flew by. I rode in the familiar silence of the Mustang, feeling the familiar vibration of the steering wheel and listening to the smooth rumble of the engine. It would seem that everything was back to normal. The car was with me, the keys were in my pocket, no one was hurt, but it was hard on my soul. My daughter's words wouldn't come out of my head. Family property. You're already old. Sooner or later, it would have been inherited by us. Parking the Mustang in the garage, I just sat behind the wheel for a while, trying to comprehend what had happened. I had been through a lot in my 72 years of life: the Vietnam War, the death of my parents, the illness and death of my wife, various personal and professional setbacks. But the betrayal of my own daughter proved to be a painful blow for which I was unprepared. I walked into the house, brewed some coffee, and sat in my favorite chair in the living room. On the side table was a framed picture of Hester, a snapshot from 5 years ago of her smiling as she hugged me at her birthday party. Everything seemed simple and straightforward back then. We were a family. The phone rang. Hester's number popped up on the screen. I didn't bother to answer it. A minute later, the phone rang again. Then it rang again. After the 5th ring, I turned it off, but it didn't bring peace. Thoughts kept running through my head. How long had Hester been thinking about me like that? How long had she been planning to take the car? And most importantly, what else did she consider family property to which she was entitled? At 9:30 in the evening, I heard the sound of a car in the driveway. Looking out the window, I saw a familiar Toyota Hester. She got out of the car and walked determinedly toward the porch. Kenrick followed her, clearly reluctant. The doorbell rang insistently and loudly. I waited a few seconds, then opened the door. "Dad, we need to talk," Hester said without preamble. Her face was determined, but I could see reddish spots on her cheeks, a sure sign that she was angry. "I think we've got it all figured out," I said, not inviting them in. "No, we haven't. You left without letting me explain myself properly." I reluctantly stepped aside, letting them into the house. Hester walked into the living room and sat on the edge of the couch. Kenrick remained standing by the door as if preparing for a quick retreat. Dad, Hester began, clearly trying to speak calmly, I understand that you're upset, but think soberly. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just wanted to please my husband and solve a practical problem at the same time. What kind of problem? I asked, sitting down in the chair opposite. This car just sits there idling. You drive it once a month, two at the most. And Kenrick could drive it every day. It would be of real use. Hester, it's my car. I drive it every day. I leave it in the garage. It's my choice. But that's unreasonable, she exclaimed with a note of irritation in her voice. Such a beautiful car is wasted. We have real needs. Erba, you have two cars. Old cars. Kenrick's Honda is 8 years old, my Toyota 5, and your Mustang is in perfect condition. I looked at Kenrick, who hadn't said a word the whole time. What do you think about that, Kenrick? He shifted awkwardly from foot to foot. Honestly, Barnett, I was against the idea. Told Hester I should talk to you first. But she said you'd do it anyway, only you'd hesitate for a long time. He doesn't understand anything about family relationships, Hester said sharply. Kenrick, you can go to the car. This is a conversation between me and Dad. No, let him stay, I said. Since he's part of the family now, let him hear everything. Hester pressed her lips together, but she didn't object. Daddy, I don't understand why you're so sensitive. Well, yes, I took the car without asking, but these things are normal between relatives. We're not strangers. It's because we're not strangers that you should have asked permission. And if I had, would you have said yes? I thought about it for a second. Probably not. You see, Hester said triumphantly. I told Kenrick. You would have found 1,000 reasons to refuse. I've just saved us the time of useless arguments. Hester, I said slowly, do you realize that you have just confessed to stealing? What theft? There can't be stealing between relatives. It's a family good anyway. Family good? I felt the anger boiling up again. I'll say it again. It's my car. It's my personal property. I bought it with my own money, restored it with my own hands. But sooner or later, I'm going to have it anyway. Hester blurted out, and there was a note in her voice that I didn't like. You're not forever, Daddy. At your age. She didn't finish, but I realized where the conversation was going. At my age, what? Well, Hester hesitated, realizing she'd said too much. It's not a big deal. It's just that the years take their toll, and this car's too powerful for an old man. You could have an accident. So you think I'm too old to drive my own car? That's not what I meant. That's exactly what you meant. Go on. Tell me what else I'm too old to do. Hester realized she was walking into a trap, but it was too late to back out. Daddy, why do you have to twist everything around like that? I'm just saying that at 72, you shouldn't risk driving a sports car. It's better to go for something a little more sedate. Who's going to decide what I drive? You? Of course not. But as a daughter, I'm entitled to my opinion. Your opinion, yes, but you have no right to steal my car under the pretext of my safety. Kenrick tried to intervene. Maybe we should all just calm down. Stay out of this, Kenrick, Hester shouted at him, then turned to me. Dad, you're acting like a cranky child. I was trying to solve the problem in a civilized way. Civilized? I couldn't believe my own ears. Stealing is the civilized way? It's not stealing. How many times do I have to tell you? Hester's voice grew louder and louder. It's a redistribution of family property. Family property? I got up out of my chair. Hester, this is my house, my car, my money. None of this is family property. Yeah? Well, who inherits it all when you die? There was a challenge in her voice. I'm your only daughter. Sooner or later, I'll inherit everything. And then she said the words I'll remember for the rest of my life. At your age, Dad, you have to be realistic. You've only got about 10 years to live, maybe less. I need to think about the future of my family now. There was dead silence. Kenrick turned pale and stared at his wife as if seeing her for the first time, and I felt something inside me break completely. So you think I have about 10 years to live? I said slowly. Dad, that's not what I meant. That's exactly what I meant. You're waiting for me to die so you can inherit. And you decided not to wait, but to take what you like now. Oh, don't put words in my mouth. I'm just talking about planning the family budget. Hester, I interrupted her, get out of my house, right now. What? You heard me. Get out, and don't come here again. Daddy, you can't be serious. Hester jumped up off the couch. We're a family. We can't fight over some car. Over a car? I gave her a long look. Hester, it's not about the car. It's about my own daughter thinking I'm practically dead and planning my inheritance while I'm still alive. I wasn't planning for anyone. You got it all wrong. I got it right. Now go away. Hester looked at me with confusion and anger. It was obvious that she hadn't expected such a reaction. All right, she said at last. If you want to be alone with your precious things, be my guest. But don't expect me to apologize for taking care of the family. She headed for the exit, Kenrick following. At the door, he turned around. Barnett, I'm sorry about all this. I really didn't know. I know, I nodded. It had nothing to do with you, Kenrick. After they left, I sat in the chair for a long time, staring into the void. The house seemed especially quiet and empty. There was still a picture of a smiling Hester on the table, but that smile looked different now. That night, I hardly slept at all. I tossed and turned in bed, trying to read, but my thoughts kept returning to my conversation with Hester. Her words that I had about 10 years to live sounded like a broken record in my head. The most painful thing was not even the words themselves, but the ease with which she said them. It was like she was discussing the weather or the price of groceries. By morning, I realized something irreparable had happened. Not just an argument that could be settled with apologies and explanations. Hester had shown her true colors, and now I saw our relationship in a completely different light. How many times over the years had she come to me for help? How many times had I pulled out my credit card when they were having financial difficulties? And all the while she appeared to think of me as an old man who was about to die, and saw her helping me as getting an early inheritance. After breakfast, I sat down at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and began to remember all the times I had helped my daughter with money. 3 years ago, down payment on a house, $20,000. A year ago, a new roof after the hurricane, $8,000. Last month, Kenrick's car repairs, $1,500. And that's not counting regular help with mortgage payments when they had temporary difficulties. What struck me most was my own realization. I had never kept an accurate account of this spending. I helped because I thought it was normal. Hester was my only daughter. I wanted her to have a good life. But now I realized that for her, my generosity was not an act of paternal love, but something taken for granted. A right, not a gift. At 9 in the morning, I called the First National Bank of Millville, where I had my primary account, asked to be put through to the loan officer. Bank of Millville, Loan Department. My name is Susan Wilkins. How can I help you? Good morning. My name is Barnett Fernsby. I have a question about a mortgage loan where I'm a co-borrower. One moment. Let me look up your information in the system. Can you give me your social security number? I dictated the number and waited while she looked at the paperwork. Yeah, I see it. Mortgage on a house at 234 Maple Street. The primary borrowers are Hester Fernsby Relish and Kenrick Relish, and you're listed as a co-borrower. What's your question? Sakita Surun. I would like to withdraw as a co-borrower and stop automatic payments from my account. There was a pause. Mr. Fernsby, that's a pretty big decision. May I ask why? Personal family emergency. I see. I must warn you that a waiver from a co-borrower will require the consent of the primary borrowers or the full repayment of the loan. Alternatively, they can refinance the loan without your participation if their income allows it. What happens if I simply stop making payments? In that case, the responsibility will automatically fall on the primary borrowers. If they are unable to make full payments on their own, the loan will go into default. How much time will they have? Key. We usually send the first delinquency notice after 15 days of late payment. If the situation is not corrected within 30 days, foreclosure proceedings begin. I wrote this information down on a piece of paper. And how quickly can I cancel an automatic payment from my account? Immediately, if you confirm your decision. But Mr. Fernsby, don't you want to discuss this with your family first? These decisions are often made in an emotional state. Ms. Wilkins, I'm well aware of the consequences. Cancel the autopay, please. Ms. Wilkins, I'd like your verbal confirmation. I need your verbal confirmation, which will be recorded. Do you, Barnett Fernsby, confirm that you are canceling your automatic mortgage payment in the amount of $1,280 per month, effective today? Affirmative. Noted. The cancellation is effective immediately. I will also send you written notice of the changes in the terms of the loan. After talking to the bank, I felt strangely relieved. For the first time in years, I had made a decision that concerned only myself, without thinking of how it would affect Hester. $1,280 a month. Over $40,000 in 3 years. Money I could have spent on myself, on traveling, on hobbies. Instead, I was paying for the house of my daughter, who thought I was practically dead. But it didn't stop there. I remembered the other financial obligations I was involved in. Kenrick's loan on his Honda. I was a guarantor there too, because he didn't have a very good credit history at the time. Hester credit cards at clothing and furniture stores. I signed as guarantor too. The next call was to an auto loan company. The procedure was similar. I explained the situation, asked to remove the guarantor's obligations. The manager warned that this could affect the credit rating of the main borrower, but I confirmed my decision. Then I called 3 stores where I was a guarantor for credit cards. Everywhere I got the same reaction: surprise and warnings of possible consequences for the primary cardholders. But I was adamant. By noon it was done. I was no longer financially responsible for any of Hester and Kenrick's loans or obligations. For the first time in 3 years, my monthly budget was solely mine. Determined to distract myself from the heavy thoughts, I went to the garage and spent an hour wiping down the Mustang and checking the various systems. The car was in excellent condition. Hester and Kenrick hadn't managed to do any damage to it in the few hours they'd had it. As I worked on the car, I pondered what had happened. Perhaps I had acted too harshly. Maybe I should have talked to Hester calmly first, explained to her how hurt I was to hear her words. But then I remembered the look on her face as she talked about my remaining years of life. There was no anger or cruelty in that expression. There was just cold calculation. That's what she really thought. And apparently she had been thinking it for a long time. In the afternoon, my buddy Fred Hughes called. We'd worked together at the post office for 15 years, and after retirement, we'd kept in touch. "Barnett, how's it going? I heard your car got stolen last night." "How'd you know that?" Robert McDonald told me. "I saw the police working on your place." "Did they find it?" I told him the story briefly, without going into the painful details of the family conflict. "Well, thank God it's all over," said Fred. "I was going to suggest a fishing trip this weekend. Lake Huron, you know that place where we had some good fishing last year?" "That's a great idea," I agreed. The thought of getting out of town for a couple days sounded very appealing. "Then we'll meet at my place on Saturday at 6 in the morning. I'll get the gear ready." After talking to Fred, I felt a little better. It's good to have friends who value my company over my bank account. In the evening, I sat in a chair with a book, but I couldn't read. My thoughts kept coming back to Hester. I wondered when she would discover that the payments had stopped. Probably early next month, when the bank would send a notice of late payment. That was 2 weeks away. I imagined her reaction. At first, she'd probably be bewildered, a technical error, a glitch in the banking system, then a call to the bank to find out the real reason. And then, I wondered how quickly she'd get back to me. Would she try to solve the problem on her own, or would she run right out and apologize? Would she and Kenrick be able to make all the payments on their own? I knew their financial situation pretty well. Hester's salary at the Department of Social Services was about $3,000 a month, and Kenrick made about the same. $6,000 for the two of them wasn't bad for Millville. But they had expenses too: mortgage, utilities, insurance, loans, everyday spending. Plus, Hester liked to dress well and often bought expensive things. Without my help, they'd have a hard time. They might even have to give up some habits and tighten their belts. And that was only fair. Let them learn to live within their means like most people do. Let them realize the value of the money I'd spent on them over the years. As I fell asleep that night, I felt calmer than I had in days. For the first time in a long time, I didn't have to think about other people's problems and expenses. Only my own. The month flew by surprisingly calmly. I began to realize how much the constant worry about Hester's financial problems had been affecting my state of mind. Now that that burden was gone, I felt much lighter. Went on a fishing trip with Fred as planned. 2 days on Lake Huron turned out to be just what I needed. Fresh air, quiet, leisurely conversations about life without family drama. Fred, like a true friend, didn't ask about the details of my problems with my daughter, though it was obvious he knew something serious was going on. When I got home, I was surprised to find the phone silent. Usually Hester called me 2 or 3 times a week to find out how I was doing, to tell me about her plans, to ask for advice, sometimes just to chat. Now there's silence. Apparently she was still sulking over the car story. I made the most of the time I had left. I made an appointment with my doctor for a full checkup, something I'd been putting off for a while. Dr. Peterson, my internist for many years, was pleased with the results of the tests. "You're in great shape for 72 years old, Barnett," he said as he looked over the results. "Your blood pressure's normal, your cholesterol's a little high, but within range. Keep it up." "How long do you think I have left?" I asked, remembering Hester's words. The doctor raised his eyebrows in surprise. "That's a strange question. With the way you live and the state of your health, you have a good 15 or 20 years ahead of you. What's troubling you?" "Nothing in particular. I'm just thinking about my plans for the future. 15 to 20 years. I wonder what Hester, who had only given me 10 years to live, and obviously thought that was a generous estimate, would say about that. I also got my finances in order, met with a financial advisor, and reviewed my investment portfolio. Without the monthly spending spree to help my daughter, I had some spare cash that could be invested more wisely. "Mr. Fernsby," the advisor said as he reviewed my documents, "with your income and expenses, you can afford a much more active lifestyle. Travel, hobbies, entertainment. Why save money you don't spend? Really, why would you? I've been frugal all my life, saving for a rainy day and for my daughter. Now that my daughter had shown her true attitude towards me and my health was allowing me to enjoy life, it was worth reprioritizing. In the middle of the month, I bought myself a new big screen TV and enrolled in a computer literacy course for seniors. Hester had always laughed at my reluctance to master modern technology, saying I was hopelessly backward. Now I decided to prove to myself that at 72, it's not too late to learn new things. About the third week of the month, I noticed that a familiar Toyota Hester drove past my house several times. The car slowed down but didn't stop. Once I saw it parked in front of Mrs. Parker's house and have a long conversation with a neighbor, probably to see if I was all right. Mrs. Parker came to see me afterwards, asking about my health and hinting that family quarrels should be settled before it's too late. I listened politely to her advice but did not respond to it in any way. Ellen was a kind woman, but she didn't understand what was going on. At the end of the month, while I was watering the flowers in the front flower bed, the mail car stopped. The mailman, Steve Connor, had been working on this property for 5 years. We knew each other. "Hi, Mr. Fernsby," he said, handing me a stack of mail. "How are you? Haven't seen you in a while." "I'm fine, Steve. I just don't get out in the yard as much during business hours. Your daughter's been driving by a lot lately. She even stopped by yesterday and asked if you were getting your mail regularly. She's worried about you." "I see," I nodded. So Hester was following me from afar. I wondered what made her keep her distance. Was it pride? Or did she still think she was right and I was acting like a cranky old man? The 1st of October brought me a special satisfaction. That was the day the automatic payment on Hester's mortgage was usually deducted. But now my bank account remained untouched. The $1,280 that used to go to someone else's house stayed with me. I imagined Hester checking the account statement and not finding the customary payment from my father's bank. At first, she'd probably think there was a technical error. He'll call the bank, find out what's going on. Then he'll realize I wasn't kidding. 5 days after the first day, the phone rang. Hester's number popped up on the screen. I stared at the flashing display, but didn't pick up. The phone went silent, then rang again. And again. She called 7 times that day. I didn't answer a single call. The next day, the calls were repeated. On the third day, the phone calls were joined by text messages. "Dad, I need to talk to you. It's urgent. Call me, please. There's been a misunderstanding with the bank. Dad, I know you're hurt, but we need to resolve this situation." I read the messages but didn't respond. It was curious to watch the tone change from confident to begging. After a week, the tone of the messages became downright panicked. Dad, the bank is threatening to start foreclosure proceedings. Please call. We received a second delinquency notice. I need to know what's going on. So they've already gotten the official paperwork from the bank. The process was underway. Hester finally realized that I was serious about the consequences of her action. Saturday morning, as I was eating breakfast in the kitchen, I heard the sound of a car in the driveway. I looked out the window and saw a familiar Toyota. Hester and Kenrick got out. They looked worried and tired. The doorbell rang insistently and long. I finished my coffee, took my time, then went to the door. I looked through the peephole. Hester was standing right in front of the door, Kenrick a little farther away. Her daughter's face was pale, her eyes red from sleeplessness or tears. "Daddy, I know you're home," she shouted through the door. "The car is in the garage. I saw it. Please open up. I need to talk to you." I stood outside the door, listening to her voice, and felt no desire to open it. A month ago, that same voice had easily explained to me that I had about 10 years to live, and I had to be realistic. "Daddy, please!" Hester's voice was getting more and more desperate. "I know you're angry, but we can talk this through. The bank only gave us a week to fix the situation. A week. So things were worse than I thought. Apparently, they've already missed the second payment." "Barnett," now Kenrick has spoken, "please come out. We can work this out." But I wasn't going to settle anything, at least not now, not when they'd come to me just because they had to, not out of remorse or a desire to mend relations, but because of the threat of losing the house. The ringing and banging on the door continued for another 20 minutes. Then I heard them talking quietly about something and the sound of a car driving away. Monday morning, I got a call from Ms. Wilkins at the bank. "Mr. Fernsby, I'm calling about a mortgage loan where you were a co-borrower. The principal borrowers have asked us to contact you. They claim there's been a misunderstanding about the cancellation of the auto payments." "There was no misunderstanding," I replied. "I made a conscious decision to stop participating in this loan. I understand, but I must inform you that the borrowers are in a critical situation. If the debt is not repaid within 3 days, we will be forced to initiate foreclosure proceedings." "That's their problem, Ms. Wilkins. They're adults. Let them handle their own issues." "Okay, I'll make a note of your position. Thank you for the clarification." After talking to the bank, I knew the end was in sight. All I could do was wait to see what Hester would do next. On Wednesday evening, as I was reading the newspaper in the living room, I heard the familiar sound of a car in the driveway. This time, the footsteps on the path to the porch sounded determined and abrupt. Hester was no longer asking. She was demanding. The knock on the door was loud and insistent. Not the ringing of the doorbell, but precisely the pounding of a fist on the wooden surface. "Daddy!" shouted Hester. "Open the door right now! I'm sick of playing these childish games." I put the paper aside and walked leisurely to the door. I could see through the peephole that Hester looked disheveled and furious. Kenrick was standing behind her with a guilty look on his face. "Daddy, I know you're in there," she continued. "Sakhinam, if you don't open up, I'll knock all night. The neighbors are already looking in the windows." I did notice Mrs. Parker looking out her window with a concerned face. I didn't want to make a public scandal for the whole street. Opening the door, I looked calmly at my daughter. "What do you want, Hester?" "What do I want?" She was almost shouting. "I want an explanation. Why the hell did you stop your mortgage payments without warning?" "I'm not going to invite you into the house," I said. "But if you want to talk quietly, we can stay on the porch." "Quietly?" Hester laughed hysterically. "We're losing the house, and you want to talk calmly?" "You're losing the house," I corrected. I had nothing to do with it. Kenrick tried to intervene. "Barnett, please, let's really talk calmly about the situation. We can find a way out." "What way out?" Hester cut him off. "Dad has decided to punish us for taking his precious car. He's acting like a spoiled child." "Hester," I said in an even tone, "I didn't cut off financial aid because of the car. It was because of what you said the other night." "What did I say? That you're old." "Well, it's true. You're 72 years old. You said I had about 10 years to live, and I had to be realistic about my inheritance." Hester hesitated for a moment, then waved her hand. "So what? I was just talking about planning for the future. All normal families do that. Normal families don't plan for inheritance while the parents are alive and well." "Oh, come on," she exploded. What difference does it make what I said? The main thing is that we are a family and families should support each other. Families should respect each other, I replied. And you've shown that you don't respect me or my property. Your property, Hester stomped her foot. Everything you have is still mine. What difference does it make now or 10 years from now? That's exactly the logic you used when you stole my car. I didn't steal it. I took something that belongs to the family. Kenrick tried to calm his wife down again. Hester, please, don't raise your voice. Don't tell me what to do. She shouted at him, then turned to me. Dad, you realize we can't pay the mortgage on our own. Our salaries aren't enough. Then you should have thought about that before you bought a house you couldn't afford. We bought it with your help. You offered to help with the down payment. Yes, I did. And I continued to help for 3 years. But it was voluntary, not an obligation. Voluntary? Hester laughed, but it sounded evil. You helped because we're your only family, because you have no one else to love and no one else to spend money on. Her words hurt, but I didn't show it. Maybe you're right, but things are different now. How has it changed? We're still the same people. No, Hester. Now I know what you really think of me, that I'm a decrepit old man who's going to die soon, and until then I should be sponsoring your life. I never said that. Yes, you did. And not only did you say it, you think it. Kenrick shifted uncomfortably from foot to foot, obviously feeling very uncomfortable. Barnett, he said quietly. Hester may have put it badly at the time, but she didn't mean anything wrong. Kenrick, you were there, I reminded him. You heard what she said, and you saw the look on her face. Okay, Hester said, clearly trying to pull herself together. Suppose I did say something wrong. I apologize, okay? Now can you put it back the way it was? No, what do you mean, no, I apologized. You only apologized because you faced the consequences. A month ago, when I tried to talk to you, you thought you were absolutely right. Hester looked at me with growing rage. You know what, Dad? You're being totally selfish. We could really lose our house and you don't care. I do care, I replied, but it's your problem that you have to solve on your own. How can we solve it? We don't have that kind of money. You can sell the house and buy something cheaper. You can take an extra job. You can ask Kenrick's friends or relatives for help. Sell the house? Hester was horrified. Do you want us to lose everything we've invested in? I don't want you to lose anything, but I'm not going to pay for your lifestyle anymore. Lifestyle? Hester's voice became shrill. We live in an ordinary house, drive old cars, don't buy anything extra. If that's the case, you can live within your means without my help. Hester looked at me for a few seconds in silence. Then her face contorted with anger. All right, she shouted. Do you want to play these games? Let's play them. I'm going to sue you. For what? I asked with genuine surprise. For not fulfilling my family obligations. Because you promised to help us and then suddenly you quit. I have documents proving that you helped with the mortgage regularly for 3 years. That only proves that I helped voluntarily. No one forced me to do anything. We bought the house with your support. It was a verbal agreement. There was no arrangement, Hester. You're just used to Daddy being there for you. Shouldn't he? Now there were tears in her voice. Shouldn't a father help his only daughter? He should, as long as his daughter respects and loves him, not a walking ATM machine. I love you. You love my money, Hester. There's a big difference. That's not true, she began to cry, but the tears looked more from anger than sadness. You're a cruel, heartless old man. Mom would be horrified at what you do to your family. The mention of my late wife hurt me. Don't you dare bring Mom into this story, I said coldly. She taught you to be honest and decent. I guess you didn't learn that lesson well. Honest? Hester wiped her eyes with her sleeve. Is it fair to abandon your family in a time of need? Is it fair to steal your father's car and think it's okay? We looked at each other across the threshold of the house, and I realized that the gulf between us had become unbridgeable. Too much had been said. Too much had been revealed. All right, said Hester at last. If you want to be alone, that's your right. But when you need help, when you get sick or really old, don't count on me. I don't, I said. I never have. Anna, we'll see, she said. We'll see how you sing when you really need a family. She turned and walked to the car. Kenrick lingered for a few seconds. Barnett, he said quietly, I'm sorry about what happened. I'm sorry too, Kenrick. He nodded and followed his wife. I watched them get in the car and drive away, and I thought about the fact that I just lost the only family I had. But instead of bitterness, I felt a strange relief. Friday morning, I was watering the flowers in the flower bed when I saw the mail car. Steve Connor waved at me, stopped at a neighbor's house, and pulled a thick envelope out of his bag. Headed straight for house number 234 on Maple Street, where Hester and Kenrick lived. I knew what it was. Official documents from the bank rarely come in the thin envelopes. Thick packets usually contain serious papers, notices to begin foreclosure proceedings, detailed repayment schedules, instructions to go to court. Steve knocked on the door, waited a few seconds, then slipped the envelope into the mailbox. Hester and Kenrick's car wasn't in the driveway. Apparently, both were at work. I wondered how long it would be before they discovered the message. The answer came sooner than I expected. Around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, as I was eating lunch, I heard the sharp sound of brakes outside. Looking out the window, I saw a Toyota Hester half-parked on the front lawn of their house. His daughter jumped out of the car, pulling out her keys on the run, and disappeared into the house. A few minutes later, the door swung open again, and Hester ran outside with a white envelope in her hands. She stood in the middle of the yard reading the papers, and even from a distance it was evident that her face had become dead pale. Then she frantically pulled out her cell phone and called someone. The conversation was short and clearly disappointing. Hester ran her hand through her hair several times, a gesture I remembered from her childhood when she was very nervous. Around 4 o'clock, Kenrick's Honda pulled up in front of the house. He still hadn't had time to turn off the engine before Hester jumped out of the house and ran to the car with papers in hand. Through my open kitchen window, I could hear bits and pieces of their conversation. "Kenrick, look what's here." "What is it?" "An eviction notice. We have 30 days to vacate the house." "How is that possible? We've only missed 2 payments." It turns out that when Dad withdrew his guarantor, the loan automatically went into the high-risk category. The bank has the right to demand immediate repayment of the full amount. Kenrick got out of the car and they headed for the house. The door slammed shut, but the loud voices continued for a long time. That evening, while I was watching TV, the phone rang. Hester's number. I didn't bother to answer it. The phone rang 4 more times, a few minutes apart, then went silent. Saturday morning, the real madness began. The first call came at 7:30 in the morning, then another at 7 in the morning, then every half hour until noon. I didn't answer a single one. About 2 in the afternoon, a strange man in a suit knocked on my door. "Mr. Fernsby, my name is Daniel Martinez. I'm an attorney. Your daughter has come to me for a consultation regarding a family financial obligation." "I don't have any family financial obligations," I replied. "Mr. Fernsby, perhaps we can find a compromise? Your daughter claims that there was an agreement between the two of you for long-term financial support. There was no arrangement. I helped voluntarily, and I stopped helping on my own accord. I understand, but perhaps we should consider temporary assistance until they resolve the housing issue?" "No. Goodbye." I closed the door without waiting for him to answer. So Hester really did try to resolve the problem through the courts. I wondered what that lawyer had told her about the prospects of such a case. On Sunday, the call stopped, and I thought Hester had finally given up trying to reach me. But Monday morning, the phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. "Daddy, it's me." Hester's voice sounded desperate. "Please don't hang up. I have something to tell you." I listened silently. "Dad, we checked all of our loans, and it turns out you canceled the surety bond everywhere, even on Kenrick's car and my credit cards." She said it like she was announcing a universal disaster. "So?" I asked. "So what? The bank is demanding immediate repayment of the car loan, and the stores have blocked my cards." "Makes sense." "Makes sense? Dad, do you realize what's happening? We're losing everything." "You're losing what you couldn't afford. We could afford it when you supported us." "Hester, the support was a temporary measure. I didn't sign up to support you for life." "A lifetime?" She laughed hysterically. "You've only got a—" She didn't finish, but I understood what she was getting at. 15 or 20 years to live, according to my doctor," I said calmly. "Enough to spend your money on yourself." 15 to 20 years? Succulent, there was genuine surprise in her voice. But you're already old. 72 isn't old, Hester. It's maturity. Daddy, her voice became pleading, I'll do anything. I'll apologize for the car, for everything I said. Just help us. It's too late, Hester. Why is it too late? We're family. Family ended the moment you said you were planning my inheritance. That's not what I meant. That's exactly what you meant. And now you're asking for help, not because you're remorseful, but because you're in a difficult situation. You could hear her crying on the phone. Daddy, please, we can really stay on the street. I don't think so. Kenrick has parents. You have friends. You'll find temporary housing until the problem is solved. This is humiliating. Stealing a car from your own father was humiliating too. Hester was silent for a few seconds. Okay, she said finally, and there was a note in her voice that I didn't like. If you want me to suffer, have at it. But remember, when you need help yourself, I'll remember this conversation. I'll keep it in mind. One more thing, Dad. I had to take out a loan against Kenrick's car to keep me going. If you don't help, we're going to lose her too. It's your choice. My choice? Hester started screaming again. It's your choice. You chose money over family. No, Hester, you chose money over family. Months ago, when you decided you were entitled to my property. She hung up, and I was left sitting in the kitchen with the phone in my hand. Outside the window, it was a beautiful fall day, the leaves on the trees burning yellow and red fire. Life went on despite the family dramas. I realized that Hester and Kenrick were indeed in a difficult situation, but that situation was the result of their own decisions. They had lived beyond their means, counting on my support as something guaranteed. Now it's time to pay the bills. It may be harsh, but it's fair. Sometimes people have to face the consequences of their actions to realize their true cost. Wednesday morning, the phone was silent. For the first time in many days, I woke up in silence, without annoying calls or hysterical messages. I was reading the newspaper at breakfast and enjoying the peace when I heard the familiar sound of an engine outside. Looking out the window, he saw a truck with a sign reading, Classic Cars, Buying, Selling, Appraising, pull up to Hester's house. A middle-aged man in work clothes got out of the cab and headed toward their porch. A few minutes later, Hester emerged from the house. She was dressed casually, her hair uncombed, her face gaunt. Kenrick came out with the keys in his hand. They talked to the buyer about something, then all three of them headed toward the garage. I realized what was going on. They were selling my Mustang. The man was scrutinizing the car, looking under the hood, checking out the interior. Hester and Kenrick stood nearby with tense faces. It was obvious that this was a painful decision for them, but they saw no other way out. The inspection went on for about half an hour. Then the man pulled out some papers, and the process of formalizing the transaction began. Hester wiped her eyes several times, either crying or just nervous. Finally, the buyer got behind the wheel of the Mustang, started the engine, and slowly drove out of the yard. Hester followed the car with a glance, then quickly went into the house. Kenrick stood in the driveway for a few more minutes, staring after the car as it drove away. I had strange feelings watching this scene. On the one hand, I was sorry to see my beautiful car go to someone else. On the other hand, realized that Hester had sacrificed the only valuable thing they had in an attempt to save the house. Perhaps she had finally realized the gravity of the situation. But it was too late. In the afternoon, a bank truck pulled up to the house. Two men in business suits and an employee in a work uniform got out of it. They had IDs and stickers that said, "Property under seizure." Hester and Kenrick came out to meet them. The conversation was short and formal. One of the bank clerks handed them some papers. Another began pasting notices on the windows and door of the house. Hester stood watching this with her hands clenched into fists. Kenrick put his arm around her shoulders, trying to reassure her. But it was evident that he himself could hardly contain himself. Half an hour later, the bank officials left, leaving the house sealed. A large yellow sign hung on the door. Property seized for debt, no entry allowed. Hester and Kenrick stood on the sidewalk in front of the house they had lived in for 3 years. At their feet were several suitcases and boxes, apparently personal items they were allowed to take. I watched from the window and thought that if Hester had come to me to apologize a month ago, if she had admitted her mistake and apologized sincerely rather than under the pressure of circumstances, things might have turned out differently. But she only came when she needed money. Toward evening, an old Honda pulled up to the house, Apparently, Kenrick's parents had come to pick them up. An elderly couple got out of the car, and it was obvious that they were as upset about the situation as Hester and Kenrick were. They helped load their things into the trunk and into the back seat. Hester was the last to get into the car, taking one more look at my house before doing so. Even from a distance, you could see the look on her face, a mixture of hatred, resentment, and despair. The car drove away, and the street emptied. Only an oil stain remained in the driveway of number 234, the mark of a Mustang that would never come back here again. The next day, Mrs. Parker came to see me. She brought a pie and evidently hoped to have a frank conversation. "Barnett," she said, sitting down at the kitchen table, "I'm so sorry about Hester." "I'm sorry too, Ellen. But maybe it's not too late to make things right. They're your family." "Used to be family," I corrected. "Now they're just people I once knew well." "You can't be serious. Hester is your only daughter." "Hester made her choice when she decided I was too old and my property was actually hers. Now I'm making my choice." Mrs. Parker shook her head. "At your age, family is all you have. At my age, peace and self-respect are more precious than a toxic relationship." She walked away frustrated, unable to understand my position. For people of her generation, family ties were sacred, no matter the circumstances. But times had changed, and I wasn't about to tolerate disrespect, even from my own daughter. A week later, Hester's house went up for sale. There was a sign with the realtor's phone number and the words, "For sale for debt." The price was well below market value. The bank wanted to get rid of the troubled asset quickly. The house was sold quite quickly. A young family with 2 children moved in a month later. The husband worked as a programmer. The wife was a teacher. Nice, polite people who said hello to me over the fence and introduced themselves. Life on the street gradually returned to a normal rhythm. The new neighbors carefully tended the house, the children played in the yard. No one yelled, knocked on doors, or threw tantrums. In the winter, I received one single letter from Hester, a short card with New Year's greetings. The return address was a small apartment on the outskirts of town. Inside were only a few lines. "Dad, Happy New Year. I hope you're doing well. We're staying with Kenrick's parents and trying to get back on our feet. Hester." No apologies, no request for forgiveness. Just formal greetings, as if nothing much had happened between us. I didn't respond to the card. In the spring, when I was working in the garden, Mr. Thompson from across the street came up to me. "Barnett," he said, "I saw your daughter in the main street yesterday. She's working as a cashier in a supermarket." "I see," I replied as I continued digging. "She didn't look so good. Thin, old. Everyone has a life. But she was your daughter after all." "Used to be," I said, straightening up and looking him in the eye. "Now it's just a woman named Hester who stole my car." Mr. Thompson realized the subject was closed and didn't bring it up again. Over the summer, I traveled to Europe. The first time in my life I'd ever allowed myself such luxury. 2 weeks in Italy, sightseeing, good restaurants, comfortable hotels. The money that used to be spent on helping Hester was now working for my pleasure. When I returned from my trip, I found one message on my answering machine from an unfamiliar number. "Mr. Fernsby, this is Dr. Miller from the city hospital. Your daughter Hester asked me to tell you that her husband Kenrick was in a car accident. He is in stable condition but will be in the hospital for a few days. She asked me to give you this information." I wrote down the name of the hospital and the room number, but I didn't go there. If Hester wanted to talk to me, she could come herself. If she needed financial help with treatment, she could ask directly. But relaying messages through a third party was not the way to repair a relationship. No one else from the hospital called. In the fall, exactly a year after the car story, I sat in the same chair in the living room and read the same evening paper. The same trees were yellowing outside the window, but the house was quiet and peaceful. No one was demanding money, stealing cars, or planning my inheritance. There was still a picture of a smiling Hester on the table, but now I saw it as a memory of the man I had once loved. That person had disappeared the moment he told me I was too old for my own life. Barnett Fernsby was no longer a father. He was just being himself.